everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Talks, where we ask real questions about real estate. I have my co-host again today, Mark Chan, with me, and we're going to do something a little bit different this time. You know, I reached out to my followers to see if there was any questions that maybe they had. Fortunately, we got a couple of people asking questions, so we're going to fire off the first question. Thank you to Matty GG17. He had the question as, do we need to be careful not to rush right now? So much hype makes people want to buy now. So, Mark, I mean, what do you think? I mean, there is a lot of hype around real estate right now.
I was gonna say that the hype is real. We've thrown out the word FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
So that is definitely another thing for a lot of buyers. Kind of some of the reasons for that, you know, like during the pandemic, a lot of people were cooped up at home, so they wanted to move, they wanted more space. That fear of missing out, seeing other people like bid on homes, and then it kind of makes you feel like, oh, you know, like, should I also like start bidding on homes, and like, how far should I go type of thing. So it's definitely a real thing. Another thing that I've noticed too is that, you know, for the people that end up win bidding offers, you know, the reason why that they're winning those offers most of the time is because they failed so many times, and now they're just willing to go like that extra mile. So I would, you know, to go further with that question, is it like, you know, should you rush, and like, should you go to like the limit when you're like submitting those offers? What do you think?
Just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean you should do it. I do think there's always a time and place, and when the timing is right, then yeah, go ahead and make that move, because it is a pretty big commitment. If you end up purchasing a house, it's probably the biggest it's the biggest monthly expense that you have. Mm-hmm. And there are probably going to be sacrifices that you're going to have to make if you are going to buy a house, you know? Especially if you're a young millennial and you're living at home and you don't have to pay rent. Buying a house is just going to add a whole lot of expenses to your life. But if you're used to renting already, it might not be that big of a shock. I think it's still going to be something maybe more substantial than what you were normally paying, because then you have property taxes that get thrown into it. But I definitely don't think you should ever rush into purchasing real estate. You have to make sure you are comfortable with the decision. We had that one buyer that we were working with. She was in her, 70s? And was thinking about being a first-time home buyer in her 70s, and she was still hesitant at that point. Our thing is not to push people to, this is like, why are you not doing this? I really think it's a lifestyle choice that you have to really want to make before you ever like purchase real estate.
I think there's certain questions that we ask buyers to see if they're ready, right, to buy a home too. You always ask the like, okay, well, you know, are you gonna live in the house for 5 to 10 years? Why do you ask people that? Or why do you think it's important that people stay in the house for at least 5 to 10 years? They're gonna purchase.
I mean, if you take away what has happened in the past year and a half, when it's normal times, you know, homes typically will only appreciate 3 to 5% every year, on average. So if you only live in a property for like a few years, the cost of selling that property is probably gonna wipe out anything that you've ever made on it. And potentially you could lose, because if the marketplace, let's say, dips a little bit, then you couple the closing fees on top of selling a property and you're at a net negative.
Even with that 3 to 5% appreciation.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't think the appreciation level is going to be quick enough in a few years. Okay. So at that point, for me, I would probably say, instead of losing money, why don't you just continue what you're doing, whether it's renting or what have you. I mean, because at that point, you're literally just gambling, is the marketplace going to increase quick enough for me to make money? If you just look long-term with real estate, that's the safest bet. And the closer or the sooner you sell a property from the time you actually purchase, chances are you might not make any money. You gotta time the market really, really right. I mean, we're in abnormal conditions right now for the past like year and a half. You know, we saw properties increase like 30%.
Yeah,
that's not normal.
It's crazy.
You know, I don't know if you have maybe any other tips for like people out there, they're looking at what's going on and they want to jump into this, like what would you tell them?
Sometimes people can get really fixed on like the list price, and I think you kind of have to like take a step back from that and just look at like how home prices have kind of changed over the years, right? So I think you know, like if the prices were to drop, how much would they realistically drop by? Because I think a lot of people also think that like, okay, I'm not gonna rush, I'm gonna wait it out, and I'm gonna wait for my 50% drop in home prices, right? We hear that,
which may not ever happen.
It may not ever happen, but you know, realistically, like, okay, if things were to correct, how much is it gonna drop by? And could I purchase now and lock in the lower interest rate, right, and stay in the property because this potentially might be my forever home, right? And just ride out, even if it does dip a little bit, right? I think you have to consider a lot of things about like what's your future look like, right? And then like if things were to come up, you kind of just plan for that as well.
I think just as you were kind of talking about like looking for what is right, I think the other thing is just don't overextend yourself as well too. I've seen people, you know, a couple that wants to buy like a 2,000 square foot house. Like, especially as your first investment, probably scale it back a little bit, live kind of within your means, get comfortable with the process of owning real estate. Because you might buy a older home that comes with repairs, and there's going to be things that you have to fix over time that you didn't expect you would have to do. I mean, you could even buy a new place, and there's going to be things that you have to repair or fix that you wouldn't normally think about. I would always say, live within your means of what's comfortable, and especially in terms of size, because the other thing is the bigger you go, more furniture you got to put in there, the more work it requires to clean the place, unless you're fortunate enough to have like a cleaner. But you know, the bigger isn't, I would say, necessarily always better. Maybe in Texas, I mean, it's a different lifestyle over there, but definitely I think here in California, I've always tried to tell people just, you know, live within your means, and, you know, there's processes to it. Meaning like, you know, you don't have to go for that 30-year home. Go for that 10-year home first, you know, so then you're not making that huge step. At least it's a foot to get into owning real estate, getting yourself, like I said, comfortable with owning and all the things that come with it. And then you just start to build your wealth over time and get that bigger house as you add more people, whether you have a growing family or what have you, and just follow kind of like the life cycles that are out there. Anything else you have in terms of tips for people like those that are on the fence, like, I see everybody doing this, should I rush it and do this just like everybody else?
You know, market conditions are one thing, but when people ask me like, oh, you know, is it a good time to buy real estate? It's kind of, I mean, I think there's two like kind of mantras that I live by, and one is like, you know, it's always better to get in early, right? It's kind of like the same thing with like investing your money. It's not, don't try to time the market, just try to get in as early as possible and let time do its thing. And the second thing that you always say to buyers too is that, you know, you're ready when you're ready, right? You know when you're ready, whether that's, you know, like financially or like even, you know, like your mental well-being has to be in the right place to make such a huge decision. So a buyer just has to really take that time to, you know, make that self-evaluation of whether they're ready to make ready to make the purchase, apart from, of course, market condition and like what's available and stuff like that.
Correct. I think those are good tips. Just make sure when you're ready, you're ready. Market conditions will always be market conditions depending on when you're ready. But I think ultimately is just don't do it just because everybody else is doing it, you know. Hopefully you guys found that very helpful in regards to the tips out there. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. And don't forget to smash that like button. See you next time.